Hello, everybody, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 15 of Rift Happens. I'm Justin, joined as semi-usual by my co-host Lucas. Over to my left, your right. And we have a very, very special guest. We have Declan McLaughlin with us. Some of our community members will recognize that name from the upcoming article, The Battle Over High School Esports Exclusivity, published back on March 30th. Declan, welcome to Rift Happens.
Hey, nice to be here, man.
Lucas, we have another week down, and we're back. Ronnie joined us last week for Rift Happens, so I wasn't able to ask you the question, but we always pose the question: how was your week? Lucas, go ahead and take it away, and then Declan, we'll give you some time to think about how your week was.
My week is pretty good. I finally wrapped up my travel volleyball season, which means I no longer have to miss our organized 5v5 sessions on Sunday nights. No more tournaments, no more traveling, no more practice. I actually get to go home at a reasonable time from now on. And I'm looking forward to the Esports State Championships in Mississippi on Wednesday, so that'll be fun.
Nice. Awesome. Declan, how's your week?
Pretty good. I mean, it was post-event stuff after VCT Reykjavik for Valorant, the Pro Valorant Tour, and it was just nice to have a couple days off and then just do post-event coverage, which is not as stressful as during event coverage.
And I don't follow Valorant a lot, especially like the competitive scene. But I did start to see it. Was it a clean 3-0 for the finals?
Yeah, I believe it was. Optic was pretty much the best team at the event by far after the first game where they lost. It wasn't really even close afterwards.
It's eerily similar to, I guess, EG's run through the lower bracket for LCS spring finals. I did see some things on Twitter kind of comparing that, and of course Optic being a big North American organization and doing that, so it's really, really cool for that. So all right, so let's just go ahead and get right into this, to introduce our guest to everybody. This is Declan McLaughlin. I know a lot of our audience already knows from the article, but he is an Indiana University grad that found esports journalism in 2018, and his words, not mine, hasn't thought about much else since. Is previously with Upcomer and now works at Dexerto for their esports vertical. So the article that you wrote, the Battle Over High School Esports Exclusivity, anything dealing with Scholastic Esports exclusivity or tournament organization or money or accessibility, all that stuff, that generates traction within our coaches community 100%. So this particular article resonated really well with our community, and it generated some buzz, and they were talking about it for days. But before we get into it, I guess I'll ask too a little bit, what is your background in gaming in general, and how did that end up leading into your involvement in the esports community now?
Yeah, I mean, I was a Nintendo kid growing up. Didn't really think much about esports until probably when I was introduced to League of Legends in freshman year of high school, which was about 2012. And I saw the Season 3 World Championships, which was probably the biggest one to date, which was the one in Staples Center, SKT winning it all. And kind of from there, I was really hooked on League. And I finally got a console outside of Nintendo and started playing everything else under the sun. And that was pretty much it for me until about 2018, when there was a class listing I saw on IU, and it was for esports journalism, which I didn't really know I could actually go into. I thought it was just a thing that just Jacob Wolf did, basically. And I took that class, and from then I was pretty much hooked on all things esports outside of League of Legends or Call of Duty or anything else.
Wow. So I guess I'll ask this. Are you mechanically gifted challenger level player in League of Legends?
Absolutely not. I peak at silver 5.
Nice.
Which is good to hear, because obviously working in Scholastic Esports, we get players of all skill levels, all abilities. Some are really, really good. Some of us are lucky to be able to have, especially with Rocket League, Supersonic Legend players. You get SSLs in high school, which is unreal. Others I know get like master level players. And then there was one like a master level ADC over in Texas in the high school league. But I like the opportunities that esports gives students, and all the career pathways that they have available to them. So you happen to be in esports journalism. So how difficult was that, or was it not difficult at all? If you were to have any advice as far as like talking about if students wanted to go that route because they're not, some of the best, mechanically talented or gifted players, how would they go about doing that?
I think just by getting your stuff out there, right? Like there are a lot of examples of people just starting on like Medium or just writing on like Twitlonger, basically breaking into esports journalism or just content in general. Like there's a lot of like talk about predatory practices in journalism, especially with internships and especially in some of the esports aspects, some of these websites that they will just give you like $5 per article or something, like just because you're starting out. But really you can just do whatever you want and just keep posting it. Like there's a guy right now who does roster leaks for Valorant, and he's only ever posted on Medium, and he's probably one of the like more not affluent, more prominent people in the community at this point. So it's just about creating stuff that you like and putting it out there. Like that's really the barrier for entry, and then you can start looking for places, because most places that will pay you good money or who are very reputable, like Esports, even where I'm at, Dexerto, when we look at people who want to come work for us, we're not looking at the places where they get published. We're looking at the words themselves. They're competent, basically. So that's probably the best advice I can give, even for content creation. Like just make a video and post it.
Yeah, I feel like that's that rings pretty true, right? We've seen that happen with a few people I know, especially in our community, who've just kind of talked about how they got into collegiate esports. We talked to a guest a couple of weeks ago from Loyola University who kind of said the same thing. Just kind of putting yourself out there. I know the Dignitas mouse pads was always a fun meme, like way back when League of Legends was first popping off. So that is immediately what I thought of when you talked about esports companies and taking advantage of their writers.
Yeah, that or exposure. That's a fun one too.
Exposure.
Yeah,
and then
you get paid an exposure.
Yeah, you talking about the Valorant account that mostly just uses Medium. I immediately thought of LEC Wooloo. Mm-hmm. You remember that? Yeah, who just Twitter leaks for a little while until he got picked up by Upcomer. So
yeah, for a long time, like 2 or 3 years, I think it was just him chugging along with a little Pokemon picture.
Yeah, just like this random sheep. It just has all these roster leaks. Pretty crazy stuff. And I think it's really cool that even to think that you said 2018, you saw an esports journalism course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was taught by an associate editor at ESPN at the time who worked on their vertical, and he actually is he was the editor in chief. I think he still is over at Upcomer as well.
Wow, that's really good. That's still, I mean, I know we're in 2022. I would expect, obviously now there to be that stuff, but even 2018, to me that's still a little shocking. There couldn't have been many courses like that out there at universities. None.
I mean, it was mostly just spearheaded by the guy who was in charge of the sports media landscape at IU, and he just had a great network of ESPN guys and just said, "Hey, do you want to do this?" And he said, "Yeah." So,
wow,
awesome.
Yeah, that's really cool. All right, so the article, the Battle Over High School Esports Exclusivity, I do have some questions here, and obviously Lucas will be giving some follow-ups too, but I do want to ask some specific things about it. So, first off, what led or inspired you, to even pursue this topic regarding the exclusivity in the high school esports space?
I think it was just the Twitter storm that came out of the emails that got sent out in January. And I didn't even follow any of the people who were very involved in the high school scene. It was mostly just collegiate people, and those collegiate people just kept retweeting, and I asked them about it. That's how I kind of started my way into this, basically.
And you're talking about the cease and desist letters?
Yes.
Yeah. So, all right. So I guess we'll catch listeners up to pace. One, you need to read the article that was posted. So if you're listening to this not live, you need to go ahead and pause and then go to Google and search Upcomer esports exclusivity, and it should be one of your top results there. But also, PlayVersus sent out these emails to. First, originally we thought it was just to other tournament organizers, saying you can't offer this title because we have exclusive rights to it, and I'm totally messing up the verbiage. Okay, so I would have to go back and look at it. But essentially, the letters were saying you're offering this title. You probably shouldn't be offering this title because we have some sort of agreement with the publisher. And I think that's where things have gotten a little fuzzy is what, do they actually have exclusivity with, or is it just an arrangement? I know like Activision Blizzard, I believe, came out and said that they're the only ones that have like pursued it, I think. And they've almost said like they're open to other people having it. But either way, those letters went out, and I believe they also went out to principals and admin and things of that nature too, telling schools, letting them know, hey, you're participating in a league that offers these titles where we have an agreement with the publisher to that. So definitely some stuff there. And then the Play versus Never hashtag started up, and the collegiate space in Twitter is they're full of hot takes. That's something that I've noticed. There was one that just happened this past weekend that caused a little bit of a storm too. That ended up going and getting deleted. We talk about it after we wrap up. But that's really cool that to kind of get the source there. So I do want to bring this question up. Your article stated this. It said, talking about high schools and middle school esports programs across the nation, it says they are more a place to build a community and a sense of belonging for students. And another line said, many of the nonprofit directors said that competing in top competition is not their goal. So I would guess based on your interviewing with those nonprofit directors, also along with the coaches of the high school and middle school, if their primary concern is developing that community and not necessarily top competition, how does this exclusivity or the deals that these publishers are making with tournament organizers, how does that have an impact?
I just think it takes away from like potential students wanting to join in, right? I had heard so many stories about when exclusivity happened for League of Legends and the not-for-profit organizations that were like, all right, we can't run League of Legends anymore because this happened. Like so many people told me about like them announcing it to their kids and then just bawling like in their seats because they really wanted to play that game and they really wanted to play with the friends they made at that esports on their esports team. So it's just like really excluding more kids, I think, and kind of really almost like hurting the nonprofits and everybody else in the high school esports who just want to like play their favorite game with their friend just in a closed environment after school. That's really the only people you're technically hurting. And I think those are like not a huge percentage, but I think it's enough that especially with a game as big as League of Legends, like it could potentially like kill the scene almost.
Mm-hmm. So I know Justin and I kind of talked about this earlier today when we were getting ready for this for the show. But even as a high school esports coach and somebody that, has been negatively affected by exclusivity, especially with League of Legends, one of my first thoughts is, well, you can always just play anyways, right? So I guess when you're talking to these nonprofit directors and these high school esports coaches that talk about this harming their scene and harming their program, do they say anything specifically about why we can't just play in a different tournament? Why does it have to be varsity esports set up by PlayVS? Is it just the organized play? Is it the fact that it's sanctioned by their school? What is it that I guess really gets them going about exclusivity?
It's the organized play aspect. And I think it's also the ability to play against other schools and kind of have more like an actual like team run thing. Like they want to have it run in parallel with like their football team and play the same teams that their football team plays. Like have their kids feel like it's not just something that's like tacked on. It's like, oh, kids are into gaming, let's have an esports team. Or like we're having an esports team. You're going to letter just like you do for football. heck, you can even go to college for it, and here are like the opportunities you might have as well. Like they don't want to make it as normal as possible, but reaching like almost the same, not the same kids, they're reaching different kids. I think it's a better way to put it.
Yeah, and I think it's worth pointing out that the deal that Riot has with PlayVersus is that PlayVersus is, to my understanding, the way I understand the agreement, is that they're the only organization that can run a high school League of Legends season. Mm-hmm. Other organizations or the high schools themselves can run a 2-week like a tournament, essentially. They can only allow in up to 16 schools. Each of those schools can have an unlimited number of teams, but still a 16 school maximum. And you cannot include certain terminology in the title of it. It can't say varsity. It can't say, I think, open. I think invitational is what it must say, I think is what has to be included in the verbiage. So if I'm going to play devil's advocate, which I tend to do, if I'm going to play devil's advocate, I'm going to say that the exclusivity isn't preventing them necessarily from still being able to have that organized competition, but it's definitely limiting how they have that organized competition.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just 2 weeks of play, like I can't think of any other sport that kind of has that, you know, like it's always a week long, or not a week long. It's always at least like 2 months long or X amount of long. And like esports can be played in any season. It can be a winter sport. It can be a summer sport, spring, like it really doesn't matter. So, I mean, you can do that. And some schools do that. Some schools just play the 2 weeks. They get like a quote unquote state championship that isn't like sanctioned at all or anything, but they still get the competition in. And if that's what they want to do, that's what they want to do. But if they want to be considered like an actual thing in their state, like something beyond just something that like the nerdy kids do, then I think they need more than 2 weeks, right?
Yeah, and I could see programs getting creative if this doesn't change. I could see programs getting creative and saying, yeah, all right, I know what we're going to do. We're going to have, this is going to be invitational number 1, and then we have invitational number 2 and invitational number 3. And just basically it becomes a season with the results rolling over from each 2-week period. But again, they shouldn't have to do that.
Yeah. And I know, tacking onto that, like I said, that was my first thought is, well, you can still play in tournaments. It's just not varsity. You can't label it, you can't label it varsity or label it high school esports teams playing against each other or anything like that. But I guess there's just something about whenever we were talking about this conversation initially, or this question initially, we talked about how does this affect people who aren't interested in the top tier of competition? Right, lots of nonprofits, lots of coaches, recognize that their teams are silver or bronze or gold, and they're not really looking for the national exposure that a lot of other teams are. They just want their teams to play with each other. But that appeals to so many people that I don't think it matters too much. I mean, how many movies do we have about like ragtag, underdog, traditional sports teams that come together and beat the big baddies in the county over to take their state championship or the regional championship? I know for my kids in particular, a lot of that is just the school identity. How nice is it to say, I am a varsity program playing for my team? I may be garbage, but at least I'm a varsity team, and I feel respected in that way. So I know that kind of limits them, especially with the exclusivity, if you can't pay the PlayVS fees or you don't want to for whatever reason. So
yeah, took the words right out of my mouth.
All right, let me have another question here. You spoke with Chris Aviles, I think that's how you pronounce his last name, I'm not sure, president and founder of Garden State Esports, which offers free esports leagues to New Jersey students, and actually perused their site a little bit. He's also a board member on RSAA, so Riot Scholastic Association of America. But he did join the board after that decision was made to grant this agreement or partnership with PlayVersus. Did any of your research, or at least your questioning with Chris, did any of that touch on maybe the future of the RSAA and what that deal is with PlayVersus?
Not exactly. As far as like the future with the contract, I'm not sure how it works or what the deal was. I know it was not like in perpetuity or forever. There's a like a limit to how long that'll be. Um, but I mean, as far as Chris Aviles, like he's on that board and he's in Riot's ear. He's in every tournament organizer's ear, talking about what he likes, what he dislikes, what he think he should do. And he's like a great teacher. He's a great entrepreneur type guy. So I think he'll definitely have an influence over there. But as far as like the specifics of resigning or anything, I'm not quite sure. Or I don't really have the information to like give it out on this point. You know?
Yeah. I just
Yeah,
I found it as odd as I was looking. I was like, man, he's on the board, and but he's also he's got his own league that they do, and they offer free of charge, and they don't. I don't know that they even use Play Versus. The site doesn't even reference it. So I thought that was pretty interesting. I was like a man on the inside.
Yeah, I mean, he's probably one of the bigger people in the community. I mean, think about it. He was quoted in my piece, he was quoted in the Washington Post piece, and he's talking to everybody all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, like Justin was saying, it's interesting. We're all hoping to hear a little more definitely what's going to go on with RSAA and Play VS, because it feels like every week there's a new rumor about this is the month it ends, and these people are saying that they're going to get rid of Play VS as the exclusive provider, and then another month passes and we don't hear anything. So
yeah, I mean,
we're all listening.
All I can really say about it is that you're seeing 2022 and 2023 as a point in esports where a lot of the VC money is going to come back to roost and ask for their money back, basically, because that's when it went big, was 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018. And these are like 5-10 year deals. So you're going to start to see a lot of changes, I think, in the next year and a half, not even just in Play Versus, just in general with some of the structure that we've had for the past decade.
So I'm completely ignorant to how that stuff works. I'll readily admit. So we're talking about like venture capital, this funding that came through that to, I guess, support this. So I guess traditionally how that works is I'm going to invest in this, but I'm going to come back almost as a loan, and then I'm going to accept some sort of payback here in the future.
Kind of like a loan, kind of just like I've invested it when this, and I bought X amount of stock, and I expect my stock to be worth X amount now. Mm-hmm. And if it's not that, then all right, I want to cash out my stock, basically, is kind of how it works, at least to my knowledge. And some of the stuff I said was also from like Jacob Wolf, who's also the same thing about LCS franchises potentially selling in the next year. So it's something that's talked about right now. It's not exactly widely reported because everybody wants to keep it close to the vest, because you don't want to be the first one that says, I can't pay back my investors.
Right. So with this exclusivity, I think one of the things too that makes this really weird as far as like an esports space is, there are a lot of times where we want to draw parallels between esports and traditional athletics because we want the same recognition, we want the same kind of competitive structure, and we want seasons, we want championships and stuff. But when we're dealing with something like esports where we're playing titles, we're playing video games that are owned by publishers, that's where we have this extra wrinkle thrown in that makes esports so unique, because you don't have somebody come out and say, hey, I own football, and you can only play football on Saturdays, and it must be at the college level because that is where the best football plays. With esports, it is different. I think there's been the conversation and some quotes had from proponents of exclusivity talking about the publishers protecting their product, right? So I guess that's kind of the counter argument from a lot of people, is saying, well, the publisher may be interested in signing some of these exclusivity deals because they want to make sure that whatever title is being played or being offered is being treated correctly. Is that kind of the sense that you're getting as well?
Absolutely. I mean, Riot loves to protect their IP. Think about League of Legends. Like, you can run tournaments outside of, like, at the pro level, outside of the LCS or any of their regional leagues, but people don't, because it's super hard to work within their constraints of their IP and how they want their tournament runs and what you can run. And you see the same thing with Valorant. Like, there are only a very select few tournament organizers that even run third-party Valorant tournaments at this point, because it's so hard to run within their guidelines. I don't know how much that works outside of like Blizzard and Overwatch League. All I know is I haven't seen like an ESL or a DreamHack Overwatch tournament since the Overwatch League started. So a lot of these, and everybody who wants to use esports as more of a marketing exercise, that really want to push it as having a developer league with franchises or anything like that, they're very protective of their IP. And they want at least the people that they know that are running it to be competent, basically.
That's a word that's going to be quoted and thrown around in the Discord. That word's going to be thrown around a lot. Oh my goodness. So in that regard, knowing publishers, maybe they have kind of an interest in that exclusivity and what they do on these deals. In your research, have you ever encountered any other examples of platforms, TOs seeking those rights?
Not exactly. Like most TOs, what they don't really want is exclusive rights. Is they just want the developer to be like, hey, we're running a tournament that's bigger than like your local Smash Brothers Weekly, and we just like to have like an OK or some sort of license. Normally, TO or developers give out some sort of license or some sort of like key that you can have so that everybody can have access to like all the champions and everything like that. So that's normally what they go after. I'd never heard of anybody going after like specifically exclusive rights to some sort of game.
And the only reason I bring that up is because in a LinkedIn article that Danielle Johnson posted, she's executive director at TechSef. She posted a bizjournals.com article about PlayVersus with this exclusive partnership with when they hit their third publisher they made an agreement with, and Mason Molyneux and Delane Parnell. So Mason Molyneux is with Generation Esports or HSEL. And Delane Parnell, CEO of PlayVersus, got in kind of a back and forth in the comment section here, and I'm going to pull up basically what was said. But Delane was basically saying, "You're mad because we got what you were going for, and you got denied." I'm going to pull up the quote directly. He says, "You run a competitive for-profit to PlayVersus. You attempt unsuccessfully to acquire the same rights as we do. We win those rights because we go about forming the relationships the right way, while you illegally infringe against the IP and push mature shooter games into schools." It's a thrilling back and forth. If anybody wants to look it up, but really a bold claim there. But the CEO of PlayVersus was making it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not too bold of a claim, I guess, if you're not trying to be bogged down in the specifics. But I mean, this isn't the first time he's come at people on social media for like the slightest of infringements as well. So, and also I haven't talked with HLSE or a lot of the other tournament organizers that are in the ISO space beyond like, hello, what do you do type of thing. But I really haven't heard of anybody else going for exclusivity the same way that Delane does on PlayVersus.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, because that was I think when I saw it the first time, that was my first inclination is if that's true, I wonder how much of the hate the hate towards PlayVS exclusivity is everybody's already negative associations with PlayVS, right? So the negative interactions, how poorly some of the seasons have gone, how frustrated a lot of people feel versus the actual act of exclusivity itself. For example, HSCL has, I don't know how warranted it is because I haven't used them very much, but for the most part, they have a much better reputation among scholastic esports leagues, among our community. And I wonder, when I first saw that, my first thought was, if they got exclusivity, would we be saying the same things? Would we be as angry at them as we are at PlayVS, or as a lot of us are at PlayVS? So it's interesting to hear that there's not really rumors of that happening, besides Delane saying it.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't in there negotiating, they could have just lied to me either way, but but yeah, poses a good question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I think that in some cases they are the sentiments toward them are amplified in a lot of cases. I think that obviously they have a forfeit issue, but every league has a forfeit issue, and those have been in esports for ever. We even did a thing here on Red Hat, so I found screenshots from back in 2011 on Facebook where tournament organizers were saying, hey, these teams that forfeited more than 2 games, you don't need to respond to my emails. Like, it was a problem over a decade ago, and it's still not, fully solved. Obviously, tournament organizers should be doing their part to try and mitigate some of those factors, and we could argue that a publisher, or not a publisher, an organizer like PlayVersus or HSL may not be doing enough to mitigate some of those factors. We could definitely argue that, but to say that they're solely responsible for all forfeits or all of some of the problems they have, I think isn't totally unfair. I will say this: Delane did comment directly about your article on Twitter. He released the Delane report. He is the next great investigative journalist of our time, apparently. But it was in response to Jacob Wolf's article. And in the Twitter comments, one of our coaches asked if he would tackle all of the other articles. And Delane responded of your article, Declan. He said, "We viewed it as less of an attack and more of a lens into how independent groups feel about our strategy." The article is his quote, "more opinion than the claim of facts there." So I'll ask you, as the author or the writer of the article, would you agree that, or do you agree that your article is more opinion than the claim of facts?
I mean, it's not my opinion. It's the people I talk to's opinion. And he's right that it's through the lens of his teachers. I basically just went around and asked everybody I could what their thoughts on PlayVersus was. And then I went back and fact-checked everything they said. And then I fact-checked everything that PlayVersus has said. And I talked to PlayVersus as well. So I wouldn't say it's opinion in that it's an opinion piece. I will say it's from the lens of teachers and educators in the space talking about PlayVersus. And then also I have a quote from a PlayVersus coach. I also talked to PlayVersus. I didn't talk to Delane. I had an email exchange basically, but I had his voice in there too. So I don't think it was an opinion piece, but it was definitely opinionated, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I know when I first saw the Delane report, which was, we still talk about it to this day and are upset that episode 2 has not come out yet. I feel like that was exactly what I got from it, is that he went after some of these other articles because in his eyes, or what he was trying to say is that, they are lying about the situation. Whereas this is more so just coaches that don't like PlayVS or don't like what they're doing. So it was interesting to me that he was, okay with, nationally known coaches just kind of saying yeah, not a huge fan. So it's interesting.
I mean, he's not going to have that many caps to put in the jar or whatever if he talked about mine, just because I don't think he could find much.
Yeah.
Cap. That sound effect is just in my head. All right, we do have some listener questions I wanted to throw your way. So this one's from Micah Smith out of Kansas. His question is PlayVersus being for-profit versus being a non-profit the issue? Based on the sentiment that you were getting, or does it have to do more with the lack of quality experience for the schools?
I think it's the lack of quality experience and also kind of the price point and how you go about it. I think it's also just kind of the conceit of having a turnkey esports system almost. You can make money all you want. It's not really a bad thing to do it in an educational space, textbooks, and I don't think Google really profits off of some of its school initiatives, but it's definitely put itself out there. So I think it's more they don't have the greatest product out there. They definitely didn't invent the product, whatever Delane says. And I think the price point should just be the price point should be different. They should be talking to schools directly, and it shouldn't be turnkey. That's why they have so many forfeits, and that's why the experience isn't great, because anybody can sign up. So thus everybody does.
Yeah, you mentioned Google. I work in instructional technology, so yeah, we're on one level of Google for our education, but we have to pay more money to get more features of it. So there's nothing foreign with charging money to schools in order for schools to get certain features. I will say, and I've said this to other people, if you're going to charge and be the most expensive league for people to join, it better be the best league, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like return on investment is huge, and I think that's kind of been where my argument is. Like, because I know some people do complain about the money, but I had to pay like $800 for my daughter to do color guard. I would much rather pay $64 for her to do esports than pay that $800. My son's about to do marching band, so I know I'm going to be hit with another fat bill there. So, I relatively speaking, this is not going to be popular, but relatively speaking, it is probably one of the less expensive options for groups and organizations or teams for a teenager to be a part of. That being said, though, there still needs to be those free options out there, right? Because not everybody can pay that money. So, but that's where I guess we get into kind of circles back to the exclusivity is if the only way these kids can compete in the game that they really love to enjoy, they want to compete in, is to pay that $64. Well, that's when we have hit the roadblock.
Yeah, it's like if you only had to use like one brand of tennis racket in high school, like that'd be terrible.
Right.
No. Yeah, it's and obviously there's the other issues that Play VS get into, right? The overwhelming issues that people have with getting their matches actually scheduled, which, we already talked about forfeit issues. It's not necessarily just their fault. It's more like, and I think of it like, how upset would you be if you paid $800 for your daughter to do color guard and she only performed once all year, as opposed to the 12 that they're promised. There's just, like you said, if you're going to be the most expensive, it's got to be worth it. And I think there's a lot of coaches that would say it is definitely not worth it for them.
Yeah, I don't see people balking at a price if they feel like they're getting their money's worth.
Yeah, especially if the school has to pay for it. If it's individual students, that's kind of weird. But like if the district pays for it, it's $100. Like, why not?
Mm-hmm.
So
next question. This is from CSD Esports out of, oh my gosh, our testing my state abbreviation. There are too many states that start with the letter A. I am totally.
Oh no! What is it? What is it?
AR. It's
Arkansas?
not.
It's Arkansas.
Is it Arkansas? So
yeah, because AK is Alaska.
Alaska, that's what it is, and AZ is Arizona. Man, this is terrible.
Nice.
English teacher, not a geography teacher. So CSD Esports asks, do you think Play Versus will win out in the war to control high school esports? And it's a multi-part question, what do you think the D1 colleges and the huge TV contracts that come along with them would like to see out of esports? Do you think they have the ability or desire to make esports viable, or is this simply a revenue control between schools, developers, and their organizations? So let's start with the first one.
It's a hefty question.
Do you think Play Versus will win out in the war to control high school esports?
I don't know, because you don't know anything with esports at this point, right? Like there could be a new game that comes out next year that the developer just says it's completely like public IP and I don't have to have developer support to do it, and thus Play Versus can't get exclusive rights to it, and then bam, high school esports is back. But like taking over would require a lot of deals to be in place across the United States, basically. And I don't know if any company can do that, let alone a startup company with a couple hundred employees. So will it ever take over? Maybe, but that kind of assumes that the landscape is going to stay the same, or that Play Versus is going to stay the same, because they're also a startup company and they either need to become profitable, go public, or get bought out. So if one of those three things happen, I think maybe in one of those scenarios they go public or profitable, or two of those scenarios they go public or profitable. Maybe they become the kings. But if they get bought out, or hell, if they go under, like then they're gone. So I don't know. And also, what's your definition of kings? Are you in like all the esports? Are you in every esports league in the state and the nation? Or are you just the most known, which they already are? So I don't know. It's kind of an unanswerable question, especially since I don't know what esports is going to look like in a year, 2 years, 3 years.
Right.
Yeah, I think that is particularly hard because of the way that FPS games play into high school esports.
Mm-hmm.
Overwatch and Valorant right now are huge collegiate esports, right? Like they are constantly recruiting. Those teams get pushed a lot by their schools, and PlayVS kind of works with Overwatch right now with the youth league, but they don't touch Valorant at all because they want to stay in the good graces of NFHS, and the state associations. So, yeah, I think as long as, yeah, I definitely agree. I think as long as they're not touching some titles, or some titles kind of stay away from them and the exclusivity label, it'd be very hard to be the Soul Kings.
And I guess it would kind of clarify too, like they only have this control, I guess, in states that buy into like NFHS, like kind of oversight, right? So a school that, or a state that wants to do their own thing, they are not required to go through Play Versus, correct?
Yeah, they don't have to do anything basically.
Are they still bound to the 2-week thing?
I would assume so.
They're still bound to the 2-week thing, but they don't have to like contact Play Versus. They don't have to do anything. I mean, states have like signed with Play Versus for a year and then not gone back to them before. Like that's not unprecedented. So like, especially if my consensus from what I gathered is that some state organizations are just really apathetic and they'd rather not pay if they don't care. So if you're never going to get like Nevada, because the head of Nevada Athletic Association is like, I don't know what esports is and I don't want us to touch it, then Playverse is just never going to get a foothold in there, except for the places that see the turnkey solution, just do it themselves.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the consensus too. I think with a lot of our coaches in the states that they're in, is there's a they see the need, or they see the want from the students, but they don't want to put in, at least at the state level, put in the time, the money, the investment, the effort to get to know how to effectively run it. So they see the easy solution. They look for the turnkey, and it's like, oh yeah, sure, just here, just do it for us. Just take it off our hands and make it work, and we'll be happy. So I guess I don't really know, what the solution there is without a changing of the guard at the state level, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even just to put it this way, like my girlfriend's a teacher. She barely has enough money to like run her classroom and get supplies. Do you think like that somebody at the top ahead of like their high school is going to give them money to play computer games? Absolutely not.
Yeah, good point. So follow-up question from CSD is, what do you think the D1 colleges and the huge TV contracts that come along with them would like to see out of esports? So obviously you've been covering esports, multiple titles, and even with Valorant, seeing it right now, everything is streamed. Like esports is really huge, obviously, in YouTube and Twitch. But what's it going to take? Really to, in your opinion, I guess, kind of break out of that?
I don't really think you can unless Riot or Blizzard want to make their games like public IP, because the media right deals he's talking about, you get them through like the Big Ten, or in professional, it's the NFL or the NBA, but they don't own those games. There's no media rights to these games being streamed at all. Like they tried to do it a little bit when they had like you can only watch the LCS on Twitch, you can only watch Overwatch League on YouTube, but like those deals are gone because they didn't have any ROI essentially. So like there's no such thing as media deals like in esports forever and always, like I think.
Okay, interesting. All right, so last response here. This is from Adam. This is SU12 out of Western New York. He's submitting 2 questions, and he said, feel free to ask one, both, or neither. Adam, I got you. We're gonna hit both of these. His first question is, do we know if Riot is happy with the Play Versus arrangement? Are there enough of us to pressure them to end or not renew their exclusivity agreement? Riot should know that Play Versus failures reflect poorly on them as well.
I mean, I have no idea.
But yeah, we did talk earlier, and you mentioned that the kind of conversation really didn't kind of drift over in that area.
Not really. And I mean, as far as like getting together, like Riot doesn't generally. I don't think anybody likes bad press. Like, just see how they've kind of reacted to bad press over the years, whether in like public settings or what people have said they've done behind the scenes. So I think at the very least they've noticed, because the Washington Post has an article about it. Jacob Wolf, who always has something bad to say, not because he dislikes them, just because that's what his reporting leads to.
Yeah.
And I don't think they care much about my article because Upcomer was dead at that point, but like it adds on to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And investors read that stuff.
Well, I know some of the stuff that's even posted. I believe some investors have hopped on there and immediately said, especially with, I think it was the Washington Post one, it may have been Jacob Wolf's, that this is all fabrication and lies. You need to get your story straight. Lucas, I'm gonna let you kind of follow it while I search that up.
Oh, say that again one more time.
I'm gonna let you take the reins for a second while I look up that, so I don't misquote.
Oh, I just didn't hear the very first part of that. I'm sorry. My girlfriend walked up right next to me and was like, "Hey, your cat's freaking out." And I was
okay.
like,
Yeah. So some of those articles, like the one that Jacob Wolf posted, one of the top comments underneath that is, "So you realize all of this is untrue and fake news, right? You should probably take it down. It's embarrassing." And this is from Peter Pham, who on his Twitter bio is listed as an incubator, startup studio incubator for Playversus.
Yep, they're in science, which is whatever the incubator is called. It's for like a tech startup incubator, which a tech startup incubator is basically like you recruit startup companies and you say, we'll give you all the resources you need to basically get big. And then we either kind of invest in it, or we're kind of like, we're advisors to your board or something like that. So he has a direct interest in saying like, hey, none of this is true.
Right.
But I mean, as far as saying it publicly, I don't know if he's like a very public guy, but like there's easy ways to, like, if the journalist is lying, like, take us to court. It's not hard.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Especially if it's untrue, and especially if you're rich enough to have an incubator like that. Like, that means you're well connected enough that you can make or break a startup's career.
Yeah, for sure.
Wow.
Follow-up question. This is also from Adam. He says, Valorant doesn't have high school exclusivity right now, as far as I can tell. Does this give us hope that Riot has learned from their mistake of giving Playversus League of Legends exclusivity, or is the writing on the wall for Valorant exclusivity as well?
I mean, I bet if like most people wanted to have shooters like being played in schools, then Playversus will probably hop right on it. But since, like you said, they want to be in NFHS's good graces, they probably won't.
Yeah, I think that's my hang up too with and I think there are some merits for shooters in high school, but I think there's still some sentiment there and some hesitation because of the climate and certain things. God forbid something happen at a there be some terrible tragedy at a school, and it's going to be hard for fingers to not point at that, knowing that odds are the playing of that video game didn't cause that tragedy, but there's always still going to be that stigma associated with it, I feel. And so I feel like the NFHS would want to probably stay far away from something like that.
Yeah, especially if it's a popular game. Like, a school shooter plays Call of Duty. Did that, like you said, did that really like matter into his decision making? Probably not, but it's not good optics to have Call of Duty on your games roster and this guy also playing it.
Right. Well, I'm Lucas. Do you have any other questions to ask? I know I gave him a lot.
No, this has just been really interesting to hear from, especially we hear mostly from fellow coaches who are kind of going through very similar things to us. So it's always super interesting to hear from somebody adjacent, but not quite in the same, or not quite plugged in the same way we are, in y'all's perspective and what you've been able to hear about and talk about. So I know I'm just grateful that this has even been written, because it's been very fun to share with people who just aren't really aware of what I do or what we have to deal with. So thank you for that.
Yeah, it was a great time reporting to, getting out of the pro sphere where everybody's just like doesn't want to talk to you no matter what.
I guess I have one more follow up question. Since you do play League of Legends, do you follow LCS at all?
A little bit, not so much since I got in Valorant, but I still see most of the big news.
So one of the major current storylines in the LCS involves the scouting of and the pipeline for native North American talent. Evil Geniuses just went 12-1 to the lower bracket, swept through teams with that have spent a lot of money on import players, and whereas EG has three native North American players, two of which are extremely young, 17, 18 years old. And so now it has reignited this conversation around we need to really be scouting North American talent a little bit more and things of that nature. Obviously, we're never going to get away from imports. There will always be imports. But obviously utilizing North American talents more so, or at least giving more North American talents a chance. Do you see exclusivity deals, or at least these arrangements like this, limiting the way that high school students can participate in the game of League of Legends? Do you see that as being relevant to that conversation?
Absolutely not. I mean, if you're going to go pro, you're not going to go into a high school team. You're going to try to go into an amateur tournament, or you're trying to try to get signed to an amateur team. You're going to try to get into, the Cloud9 scouting combines, the FlyQuest scouting combines. Like, I think like high school and even to an extent collegiate esports is more of a community thing and more of like giving esports and gaming a more stamp of approval than it would be in the past, and not exactly a direct path line to pro. Because like if a 15-year-old can get signed by an organization to be a streamer, and then once they turn 16 to play in a pro league, like why would they ever go to their school or their college team?
I appreciate that. I really like that insight, because we can oftentimes just have our own little echo chamber in our server, and we're everything that we say. Obviously, we're all advocating. We're all on the same team. We all advocate for Scholastic Esports and see the merits. And sometimes it's going to be difficult for us to see things objectively, and we want to kind of turn everything towards this means that we're more important. But you did reference that in the article too. You were talking about that there are players competing professionally in Valorant who are either in high school or dropped out of secondary education. Like they were
Multiple.
and just like, I don't need this anymore. So they're out of there. And I've told even some that when I was at Spring Hill College, when I was working on recruiting kids, I was like, well, what do you want to do? And these are kids that are like bronze and silver in League of Legends. I'm like, what's your goal? Like, what do you want to do with esports? And he's like, man, I want to go pro. I'm like, listen, you don't need college for that. You can go pro from grandma's basement. Like, you don't need this. If that's your goal, then you're kind of looking in the wrong area. So I do appreciate that response.
Yeah, it's I think that lines up really well with a lot of the stuff that I see just in collegiate and high school esports Twitter from directors who are very honest about this situation. And I actually asked one of our guests from a few weeks ago about this, the director at Loyola University. He just hopped in there because when you look at top leaderboards, or any time where collegiate teams intersect with pro teams or amateur teams, there's a reason you don't often see the collegiate teams beating the other teams, right? Like if you're going to go pro, you're going to go to an amateur team just like this. So I don't see that changing anytime soon and we've talked about this a lot. I don't see that changing anytime soon until NCAA and NFHS start making rules around amateur status. Who knows when that's going to happen, considering we just hand off everything to these other governing organizations regarding esports. So
yeah, I mean, who says they even if they do get involved, like a lot of these developers, they're selling the path to pro through their game client, essentially. Like next year, Riot's they announced a couple days ago their new circuit for the Valorant Champions Tour, the pro circuit, and it includes franchise teams, and it also includes a new in-game client that's, instead of ranked, it's your path to pro, essentially. If you get 5 people in there, you go play, and then if you win X amount of matches or if you win a tournament at the end of the year, then you could be matched against, pro orgs in the North American equivalent of Pro Valorant. Like,
Wow.
they don't see schools like at all. They don't see Scholastic at all. They just see how can we get, what's the ROI per League of Legends player per esports watcher, basically.
Wow. I mean, they do still control like the collegiate side of League of Legends, right? I think they still run C-Law. That's directly through them.
Mm-hmm.
But as you said, we've seen those like college teams go to proving grounds and things of that nature, and some colleges field 2 teams in proving grounds. I saw that as well. I think Maryville did as well.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't follow up on how well they did, but that being said, that is, it's a team that they're putting together. Whereas, again, you have a kid that's master's level or grandmaster's level at home can be picked up to be with an organized group of more challengers or grandmasters, and it's really going to be hard to replicate that in the Scholastic scene when, as you said, you can do it from the comfort of your home. You path to pro directly from your home computer in your bedroom.
Yeah. And not to say that I like that. I mean, I'd like people to come in with like a more team aspect and understand like what a coach does. Like, you'll be surprised how many 16-year-old Valorant kids they'll get into the team and just think they're like God's gift to earth and won't listen to anybody. And I feel like that's pretty heavily mitigated in any kind of team environment where like a coach or a teacher is involved from like day one of you playing the sport. Like, I can't remember a time when I was little and I didn't have a soccer coach.
Yeah.
And I think that humbles us.
Yeah, we talked about that too. Even bringing Adrian Risley on from WeThink when he was discussing like the soft skills that they work on developing with the teams. Esports is more than just we're sitting down and playing video games. It is developing those soft skills and giving some of these kids the opportunity to be a part of a team, and they've never been a part of a team before. They've never had that experience. They don't know what that's like, and this is giving that to them. But unlike things like football and the NBA or NFL and the NBA, there's no requirement for you to even go the collegiate route. There's no requirement for you to even go to school. You're not drafted or anything of that nature. So until that structure's there, it is going to continue to be the Wild West, essentially.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, Declan, I want to thank you again for being on with us. I know it was kind of all over the place, but there was so much in the article that was really good that we could touch on. But it was really cool to get your insight and your experience and in the coaches that you talked to, and just kind of hear straight from you, what that experience was like, and then get some feedback to some of our questions. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. And can I just say one thing before I go?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of advise everybody, I guess, who's in the community and stuff, is just, you talked about the bubble, and I think I also encountered this when I was talking with people about esports. Like, you guys really need to understand the industry as a whole if you want to make it as big as you want it to be, or as high school as important as you want it to be. And I'm not saying like you need to go off and do anything big, but just pay attention to the esports media and understand who to subscribe to and who to listen to. You've got Dexerto, Upcomer, Esports, esports.gg, kind of. Washington Post is a great vertical. There's Esports Insider, and there's a ton of different business blogs. Even Sports Business Journal as an esports reporter. So just paying attention to that, even at a surface level, I think will really help you guys' understanding of not only the scene, but also kind of the priorities of everybody who's involved.
I think that's a really good point too, because we do have our bubble, and it's hard for us to look outside of what we're doing, and even what we're doing within our own states. Right, it's hard to see like what's happening industry wise beyond here are some career options available to you, because many of us are high school educators, so that's kind of our, I guess, where our focal point is. Lucas, would you agree based on our experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one of those where it's the double-edged sword. It's really nice to have a support bubble and people who know what you're going through. But yeah, I find that when I ask like, oh, have you heard about X thing that has happened in the collegiate scene? Or there's this article that came out about blah, blah, blah. Unless it's directly related to Play VS, there's very few of us who are really clued into that kind of stuff. And I think a lot of that is timing related. unfortunately, a lot of us are moonlighting as teachers and esports coaches, and so we kind of just latch onto our little areas, and we're like, okay, great, I can handle this, so we're gonna stick here. But I know there's a lot of us with high aspirations and also some goals, right, in what we want to happen in the scene. So definitely agree with that. Very happy you brought it up.
Yeah, very cool. Well, thank you for the advice. That is going to do it. We're going to wrap up Season 2, Episode 15 with Declan again. Thanks again, Declan, for being with us. Lucas, thank you as always for coming on and helping me out with this whole co-hosting thing. That is going to do it for us. Y'all have a great week. We'll see you next time.